Good evening. I wanted to make this a little educational. A lot of this is going to end up in circuit court. We're in circuit court, something's wrong in your life. The circuit courts originated with the colonial period back in 1775, before the Revolutionary War. Functions were suspended until after the war, and then in 1776 the county courts were opened and justices were appointed in every county in April of 1777. Each circuit court judge is appointed by the governor and must stand for election. The judge's name is placed on the ballot in the first general election at least 1 year following the vacancy that was appointed. The judge may be opposed formally by one or more qualified members of the bar, with a successful candidate being elected for a 15-year term. So this is really important. And also, if you think about it, this is what impacts on the community with sentencing and rehab and things like that. So it's really important. Real quick, just wanted to let you know that in 2017, the crime in Cecil County was down about 10% overall. With that, I'd like to start on the far end. Ask the judges to introduce themselves and kind of limit it to 5 minutes or so. Tell us about yourself and your experience.
5 minutes or so. I say, giving a microphone to lawyers, judges, or whoever is a bad idea. You would want 5 minutes. So, good evening. I'm Will Davis. I am the current sitting judge in Cecil County. I was appointed by Governor Hogan on July 7th, 2016. And kind of this, I was going to give a little history of kind of how the judgeship works. I'm still going to do that. So just to let you know that the judgeship election is totally different, as we're hearing from the other elections. When you're looking at it, to me, the judgeship is kind of a confirmation of judicial appointment. Now, the judge, after being confirmed, is in office for 15 years. So, as Bob said, the stakes are high. We can't simply just correct a decision we make in the next 4-year election cycle. That's why the judge is initially appointed by the governor. Now, I went through an extreme vetting process. It was consisting of interviews by local and statewide bar associations, by lawyers, by lay people. And that goal of those meetings was to assess my judicial skills, my temperament, as well as my fitness and my character. Finally, I was interviewed by the governor, and he determined that I was the most qualified for the job. So I've been on the bench now for about a little over 1.5 years, and I gave up my solo practice to serve the people of Cecil County. Now, on the bench, hold on, over here. I take what I call a common sense approach to the law and to managing my courtroom. So some of the comments I've heard from lawyers and from litigants are, one, they say I listen to people and I give them a chance to speak their minds. I think it's important as a judge to not go in with your mind already made up. You need to listen to everyone, listen to all arguments that they're making. There are times that you might lean a certain way, then hear a lawyer or a litigant say something, and that swings you back around in a different direction. So it's always important to be open-minded. Another thing is, I've heard that people were happy that I look things up when I'm uncertain, and even when I am certain. When I say that is, shooting from the hip is not a good idea for a judge. We need to make sure that we abide by the law. And if we're uncertain on the law, it's important for us to look the law up. And sometimes even if we are certain, I'll look the law up so I can confirm that. Because I might have attorneys in front of me who, they think they know the law, and I say, no, you're off. So I can look the law up and say, this is what it actually says. And probably one of the real important things is that I make sure people leave my courtroom with a full understanding of the decision that I made and the law. Now, oftentimes people come before me, and this is the only time that they're heard. It might be a domestic case, might be a criminal case. Maybe they're not heard by their spouse. Maybe they're vague complaints and call the police and aren't heard. They get a chance to come in front of me, and they get a chance to speak and speak their mind. And I listen to them. I don't shut the door. I don't tell them to be quiet. I listen to these people, give them a chance to be heard. And even if I'm making a decision that they ultimately aren't happy with, they walk out with the satisfaction that a judge has listened to what arguments that they had. Now, while on the bench, there's a number of accomplishments I've been proud of. I think the one I take the most pride in has been my success with the juvenile delinquency docket. So let's talk about the juvenile docket. A lot of judges don't actually like the juvenile docket. I've talked to many judges who feel like that's a chore. They loathe it. I love it, actually. To me, juvenile delinquency court is really the first real step in prevention for some of these children. I've seen complete changes in a lot of different troubled youth. Now, one of the first things I instituted when I took over the juvenile docket was ordering review hearings for at-risk youth. Now, these hearings could be as frequent as every 2 weeks, but normally they're around every 30 days. Now, when I say at-risk youth, that can be youth that there's high risk of recidivism, so maybe they're just bad kids. But sometimes it's not that. Sometimes at-risk youth are ones with extreme truancy issues. Hard to believe that our kids don't actually go to school all the time. So when they get in front of Judge Davis, I say, you're gonna go to school. Kids who have disrespect issues for their parents. Hard to believe some of our kids don't respect our parents here. So they get in front of me and I say, no, that's gonna change. Children with drug problems, and I'm not gonna probably say hard to believe about the drug problem, because unfortunately, we all know it's a major drug issue here, and I'll get into that a little bit later. Now, some examples of success stories I've had are, I had one young man who was an extremely truant young man. I mean, because he was in front of me for, it wasn't a real serious offense that he originally did, but he didn't go to school. And prior to me taking over the juvenile docket, he slid through the cracks. And after I got in there and we started doing the reviews, he wasn't able to slide through the cracks. And this young man wasn't going to school. And the wonderful thing about what I can do with the juvenile docket, I can threaten people with a place called the Charles Hickey School down in Baltimore. Just the name probably doesn't sound too appetizing to go to. So this young man turned his life around. I mean, I actually just got something recently saying it was a complete turnaround. His teacher sent letters. He's gonna graduate. He was on his way to failing. He's on his way to having to redo the 12th grade. He's about to graduate this year. So I mean, that was a wonderful story. I have another young man who came in front of me and he was picked up off of a warrant. He had been on the loose for 6 months, got picked up on a warrant, high as a kite. And I put him down at Hickey School for a couple weeks and came back, and he came and I said, look, you're gonna get these review hearings. About 60 days later, came back, this young man looked like a different person. He was clean cut, he was in his rehab, he had a job. So I mean, I'm looking at things and I'm seeing success. I'm seeing things that are working for our youth, which I think should make us all happy. We should all applaud the youth who are doing well. Now, again, the real success of the review hearings lies in the fact that they have to keep coming in front of me. So it's not just having a hearing and just going to court and seeing nobody. They're coming in front of me, and I'm addressing them directly on their conduct. Juvenile Services says, they tell me what's going on. I look at that young man or young woman and say, what's going on? Why aren't they going to school? Why are you doing this? I look at their mother or father, whoever there, I said, what are they doing at home? Are they a problem at home? And sometimes it's hard to pull teeth on the parents to get them to talk bad about their kids, but they'll do it. And I said, look, I can't help you unless you help me help you. So again, it's been very successful. These hearings, I think it's been wonderful. The juvenile services workers have been excited about it. Okay, I'll wrap it up. Another issue just for criticism has been sentencing. Some people talk about sentencing. Let me tell you the goals of sentencing is public safety, deterrence, rehabilitation, and punishment. So the real question is, what is the main issue for a particular sentence? Sometimes you all don't, people are upset when they see a lighter sentence, but it might be that punishment in that situation was important or was appropriate. But what I'll tell you all is, I have noticed an increase in drug-related violent crimes like burglary, robbery, and murder. And what I'll tell you now is, those actions will not be tolerated. If you commit those crimes, you will go to jail. My main objective is the public safety here and making sure the people in Cecil County are safe. And then just real brief, you all know I'm involved in the community heavily. I go to schools, I do mock trials with the kids, I do career day with the kids. I'm on the board for Youth Empowerment Source. I've been on the board for Cecil College, YMCA. It's all about the community. I believe that this job is not just a 9 to 5. I think the 5 to 9 is just as important. And I will continue to do things in the community as well as the bench, and I believe that I will remain the best option for you all on Circuit Court for Cecil County. Is that a good wrap up there, Bob?
Thank you.
All right.
My name is Michael Smigiel. I want to start out by telling you that Will Davis, the Honorable Judge Davis, E.B. Fockler. They're both friends of mine. They're both well-qualified, good men who will serve the citizens of Cecil County as the judge fine. So I don't have a bad thing to say about either of the people that are up here with me. And hopefully you'll judge us on what we have as qualifications. And you can't lose, because I think you got 3 people who are qualified to do the job. I ask you to choose based on the qualifications, and so I'm going to go through some of mine. And I won't speak for the others because I don't know. I'll let them tell you. But I have about over 2,000 trials in my almost 30 years of practice. I've had over 24 appeals to the Court of Special Appeals, the Court of Appeals. I've been in Federal Court of Appeals. I petitioned the United States Supreme Court for certiorari. They denied it. It was for representing a police officer. I did 12 years in the legislature, where I was on a judiciary committee. Had to deal with 2,000 or 3,000 bills each year and amendments to them, so we know every aspect of the law, tearing it apart. I was the only Republican in either the House or the Senate that was allowed to be a vice chair of any committee. And I was the vice chair of the juvenile law. As His Honor said, I had an interest there. And that was because I never put politics ahead of the law. And so the law was the law. It didn't matter if you were conservative or liberal, it's what the law said. And when we had to write a law, what I'd do is, we're gonna write a law dealing with whether or not you can be charged with homicide in a car if you did something extremely negligent. Ocean City, car goes over the curb, the person's drunk, hits somebody and kills them. And so the first thing I do is put my son or daughter on that curb and think, how do I want to punish that person who was drunk and drove off that curb and hit my child? And then the next thing I do is put my child behind the wheel and say, if my child made a mistake and they were drunk, how would I want them punished? Somewhere in the middle lies the answer. You know, and I think as a judge, you've got to look at that and look at the circumstances for the people involved and say, you know, how is that punishment going to be? Now, some of the things, we can't tell you as judges how we're going to rule on different cases that would come before us. But what I can tell you is that in passing legislation, as far as child molestation, I passed the strongest protections for children in the country. When I was in the legislature, 3 bills, no good time credits. You molest a child, you do something to a child sexually, there's no good time credit. You do the time that you're given. I also passed the strongest 4th Amendment protections for the citizens of Maryland in the country. And when they were spying on us with drones and not getting warrants under the 4th Amendment, we said, well, we'll turn off your electric at the NSA and we'll turn off your water if you don't go and get the warrants before you come and spy on us. So we were able to pass the strongest 4th Amendment protections. So the Constitution is something that is first and foremost that I will follow. I've read it, I understand it. I'm probably the leading Second Amendment advocate in the state. 2 nights ago, I was before the hearing board getting somebody who had been denied by the state police the license to carry, and he was 30 years as a military pilot. He had run the drone program, the Predator program, to find and eliminate the leadership of Al-Qaeda and other groups. He was also in charge of the security for our nuclear program, and the breach that had occurred got all of his information, where he and his family live, what they do, and state police wouldn't allow him to have a firearm. So we went down, we were able to reverse that and get him a permit to carry, because 30 years of service, you know, with the United States military as a Navy pilot, I think deserved the ability to protect him and his family, especially after that kind of service. So those are the kind of areas that I've done in the legislature with regards to passing laws and such. I've also been published in the Law Journal, the Bar Journal, for the Second Amendment. They had an anniversary issue, and I published an article there. I changed Maryland's Constitution. Maryland had a problem in the Constitution where we came up with the Court of Special Appeals after we had had en banc appeals, and the en bancs were going to the Court of Appeals directly. People were sending them to the Court of Special Appeals, but the Constitution didn't allow that. So we were able to go in and fix that, went to the voters, and so I've actually made changes to the Maryland Constitution. Something I think is important, and I hope that you do, is in Cecil County, we don't have a veteran on any of the benches, district court or circuit. I left high school early. In high school, I left my senior year. I joined the Marine Corps in 1975. I got out in 1979. I think it's important. The governor had placed me, Governor O'Malley, on a commission, which was the Veterans Court Commission. And that was to see whether or not Maryland should have veterans courts. And at first I thought, oh, really, we just need more veterans on the bench. But when I went to this commission and we sat through all of the hearings, I found out the special issues that veterans often have and how treating them as though they're back in the military, and these volunteers come in and help them get on their meds, help them get their things that they're supposed to have. The recidivism rate goes down to just about nothing, and they're able to keep these people from, if they went out and shoplifted or they did something, as long as it wasn't a sexual crime or a assault of some kind, they were able to go into the veterans courts. And I think that that's something, it brings a perspective. And I think that being a veteran gives you a perspective on that. I would hope that you also think that that is something that we should have in Cecil County. My philosophy is to follow the Constitution, as I told you, and we've unfortunately gotten away from that. There's unfortunately too much on the bench where people try to create law. I think we should follow the laws as they're passed by the legislature. I believe in strict construction. You read it as it was written, and that's, if there's a need, then the legislature changes it and fixes what needs to be fixed. But I do believe that people who come here from out of state, and they either, I was a victim not too long ago of 2 burglaries at my house, and I had to go through having the state's attorney take this person who had a long history of using heroin and stole firearms from my house, and had to go through, and I was quite upset that they would not prosecute him for the gun crimes. If you're in possession of firearms and you're a convicted felon, you should be prosecuted for that. They should not be always, and you need to, if you're a judge, to say no when the prosecutor comes up and says, I would like to waive these. You have to have the wherewithal to stand there and say, no, I don't think that's a good idea. Okay, well, I've been asked to wrap it up, but I think while we're all good people, I think sometimes you want to have somebody who's willing to stand up to the establishment and say, no, that's wrong. The Constitution says this, and that's the way it should be done, and follow the Constitution. And that's my promise to you, is that is what I will do. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Edwin Fockler. I'm a lifelong citizen of Cecil County, except for a couple of years I lived in Florida. I want to thank everyone, the Republican Club, my family, my friends, everyone that's here for coming tonight, and also want to thank Judge Davis and Mr. Smigiel for their comments so far. As I said, I've lived here my whole life. I went to Charlestown Elementary School. I went to Northeast High School and Middle School. I went on to the University of Virginia, where I majored in history. I came back here, and in 1982, on my 22nd birthday, 1986, I was elected to the Republican Central Committee. And after a brief time, there was nothing for me to do here at that time, and I went to Florida, where I ended up managing in retail for a couple of years. I came home. I opened a business in the fall of 1990, where I ran the Warehouse Pub. I had it for 5 years. That gave me an experience, of course, that has really set the foundation for the rest of my life. It led me into the law. When I graduated from college, I really wanted to be a teacher. And I think I have the heart of a teacher, and every chance I get as a public defender, which I've been for the last 9 years, every case is a chance to teach and to help put somebody in a better position than they already were. And that's what I've done. The experience as a bar owner was very, very profitable in that I managed teams, I managed people, I booked bands, I went out, we promoted all over the place, and it was very successful. And I started to lose my taste for it when we had 3 incidents, in one of which I had a shotgun in my face and was robbed point blank. And that was probably the beginning of the end. And I said, I think it's time to do something else. And that's where I decided to go to law school. So if you know my father, he was an attorney in Elkton for about 50 years. He passed away last year. And he was a private practice attorney. When I concluded my law school studies, I thought I was going to go to practice with my brother Carl and my dad, and we'd be Fockler. Carl at that time wanted to be, or started working for the state's attorney's office, and I wanted to not limit my fledgling career and not do criminal law. And I didn't really have any experience with criminal law at the time, because everything I'd done was landlord-tenant, civil contracts, just the plethora of everything there is, custody, divorce. I had a lot of experience with that. So as I started my practice in 1999, it ended up that most of my work was divorce. I don't know how I got it. I didn't advertise. I was busy. I got married. I had two children, and one of them was ill quite frequently, and the insurance issue was a problem. And there was a job that came open when Judge Schneider went to the bench with the public defender. I've been doing some panel work with the public defender's office prior to that, but it wasn't a major part of my practice. And I ended up applying for that position, and that's where I've been for the past, it'll be 9 years a month from today. And during that time, I had no idea what the public defender's office did, really, and how the court system really couldn't function very well without, we have our problems, but we do carry the bulk of the criminal defense in the county by far, much to our chagrin. We'd love the private bar to take more, but the system isn't set up to work that way. So on average, over the last 9 years, I've had approximately 1,000 appearances a year. You know, I'm in district court, circuit court on a daily basis. I was before Judge Davis on a regular basis up until recently, when I've been moved out temporarily, I hope, to Chestertown, where I've been working for a week. So I'm not around. If you don't see me around, that's why I'm not around, because I'm working in Kent County. I want to touch on what the judge was saying previously about the juvenile court, where the people who come to the public defender, they have to qualify, and right now they do it through the commissioner's office. So we don't get to pick what cases we get. They don't pick their attorney, we don't pick our client. So we get everything. And it could be anything from a murder to a traffic ticket. It's jailable for the most part, and we deal with people at their worst. And doing this over the whole time, and in Cecil County, we as public defenders do everything. We're not dedicated to one particular genre of the practice. So we have to work with multiple state's attorneys, we have to work with multiple judges, and we have to somehow get our client, some of them are seasoned clients, they don't need a lot of assistance going through it, they know what's going to happen. But a lot of them are very afraid, and we walk them through from actually the day after they're arrested, when we do their bail reviews, which we're ordered to do. We meet them there, we represent them at the bail review, and all the way to the end through sentencing and through post-trial things as well, modifications of sentences, violations of probation if it comes to that. And every step along the way, in my role as a public defender, is to teach. And I teach by finding out what the problem is, the fear that my client happens to have. Some of them just don't want to go to jail. And you go, well, you can go to jail. Everybody can go to jail. You prepare them for that as best you can. You probably won't, but you may. And if they're definitely going to go to jail, you tell them. And say, we have Judge so-and-so. And this is what we're going to do. This is the strategy we're going to have. Or if we can do some preemptive work here prior to trial date, maybe we can make the thing go away. Whatever it is, but every case is its own animal. The reason that I feel particularly qualified to be a judge is I always, and this started back in my custody practices, I'd have a divorce person seeking a divorce or otherwise, coming to me with, hating the spouse or hating the whatever the situation. It's a bad situation, very emotional, and I would try and disarm the emotion and have them look ahead. And I'd start in the middle. I'd say, look, let's start 50-50 is the right thing. Your kids need you, your kids need the mother or father as well. Start there and we'll work backwards. And I wasn't always the right fit for someone. I'm not a grandstander. I don't get up in court and I don't shout. I listen, I think, and then I try to respond appropriately. Not every client's gonna go for it. And I've been yelled at by clients, I've been fired by clients, and usually I'm perfectly fine when they fire me because they're not listening to me in the first place. And I have that luxury as a public defender. We don't, one less client's not a bad thing, really. Am I close? Sorry. So, again, going back to the juvenile situation that the judge was talking about, we deal with the children from day one, and we too follow them through the review hearings. It doesn't go away. The juvenile system doesn't go away, and they are so important to get them through. And it's great to see the success stories. And we as public defenders are no small part of that. And I can't go through things and favor one side or the other. In court, I will zealously represent whoever it is for the point I'm trying to make, even if I don't believe it at all. And I do that frequently too, as a zealous advocate for my client. However, in private, I'm telling my client, this is what's gonna happen, this is what you should do, you need to take personal responsibility for this, not do it again, and walk a straight line. And that's what I expect from everybody that's in front of me, and I try and teach them and have them, encourage them, and have them hear the things that they probably never heard in their lives from other people. They may hear from Judge Davis, and they hear from me too. So thank you for listening, and I appreciate your time and attention.